In the wake of FIFA's written decision, which was revealed online on why the World Football Governing Body rejected the appeals from the seven former naturalized players and Persatuan Bola Sepak Malaysia over their arguments in which they felt that FIFA should not have been that harsh in throwing the rulebook at them. The mood was reflected on and off the pitch as Malaysia barely edged out Nepal 1-0 in their penultimate AFC Asian Cup Group E qualifying at tonight. And yes, it took the second half for the Harimau Malaya to finally get going when they scored through Faisal Halim, but all in, I must admit, there wasn't that much to speak about overall in terms of the performance. Perhaps the mood from not just on the pitch but also off the pitch, where there was still some support from the fans who attended the game, but it wasn't as cheerful or boisterous or spirited as it used to be in the previous home qualifiers, particularly when they defeated Vietnam 4-0 back in June, which is now felt like more than a million years ago. And I think on that morning when FIFA released the judgments on its decision to reject those appeals online, that was when the whole mood really fell flat. It fell really flat. While it didn't really surprise why they rejected, but I think there was a sense of shock in which how the entire document falsification of documents came about, and that flat mood that was reflected on the stands was also reflected in the players, also reflected in the way how they played. It is true that the Tigers dominated for much of the game, but for some reason they didn't have much to show. And it actually didn't help that Arif Aiman had to come off injured after just 9 minutes to be replaced by Faisal Halim. And to be fair to Peter Flamowski's Tigers, they actually pressed the ball back within their own box for much of the game. But there was very little to, I would say, very little end product to show for. Perhaps the Malaysian bola sepak community felt really flat, knowing that despite ending their international year with an unbeaten record, but some matches could be under jeopardy. Their their opening Asian Cup qualifier against Nepal in March, and that 4-0 win over Vietnam. Now there's a very good possibility that these could be overturned. And it didn't really help that FIFA are also going to review the three games in which some of those seven players had been involved in against Cape Verde, Singapore, and Palestine. All of which I think the official home game against Cape Verde was where Gabriel Palmero was involved. The game against Singapore, where they actually fielded a number of players in that of those ineligible players in that Causeway rivalry, Causeway Derby friendly, and now, and then the Palestine friendly in Johor. So you get the weird feeling that despite Flamowski ending the entire 2025 international calendar unbeaten, which actually by any ordinary circumstances would have been an impressive achievement ever since he took office. He showed great competence before the seven came in, after the seven came in, and in the ongoing storm over the documentation fraud and also the ineligibility of the seven players who are now still suspended, and I mean, at this moment, subject to the final appeal to the Court of Arbitration of Sports, it still stands at a 1 year ban for each of those 7 players. Yeah, it felt like an eternity when Malaysia was that high in the middle of the year after defeating Vietnam for the first time in more than a decade. But with those explosive revelations by FIFA, it's like it's a very flat feeling, and that flat feeling was summed up best by those missed chances Malaysia had. You can't fault them for the lack of urgency. They were definitely urgent enough to want to do something to score, but there was something that made this whole game very flat. Nepal did certainly set up their stall to try to just contain the Harimau Malaya team, but it's pretty clear that those in yellow, after Arif Rahman left, were laboring a lot more and didn't have much to produce. So this is going to be the shortest video I'm going to probably produce in a long while where this is concerned. But I do feel that Paulo Jose's penalty that went over in injury time towards the end of the second half just sum it up. Very flat, unimpressive, and that mood was prevalent. They played okay, but not outstanding. They did alright, and they did a professional job. Matt Davis and company weren't tested at the back. But I think that news of the fallout, or rather the news over how FIFA thinks of Persatuan Bola Sepak Malaysia, was very telling. And we don't know whether Malaysia will be able to finish their Asian Cup qualifying campaign against Vietnam on 31st of March, since FIFA had already said that they are going to commence additional investigations to look deep into how Persatuan Bola Sepak Malaysia operates. And now that the cat is really out of the bag, I think probably at this moment, whether the Harimau Malaya will reach the Asian Cup could be the last thing on their minds, and which is a big pity for Peter Flemonski, because through the highs, through the lows, Flemonski had actually kept his focus on the job, kept his focus in getting the players he had available at various points ready for selection through the tactics that he had, and the players responded to him through thick and thin. So, given that, even though right now Malaysia is still top with 5 straight wins, we will expect that by next year, Harimau Malaya will be deducted 6 points for their involvement in using illegal players for the first 2 games of Asian Cup qualifying. And what happens thereafter could probably rub more salt into the wound. And I think, in fairness on what has been said so far, this is a very flat, one of the poorer performances under Flemonski. Even in the friendlies that they played where Flemonski was looking at a few options, this was admittedly one of the poorer performances by his high standards. So, all in all, it was a job done, but the Ultras Malaya's anger was very clear. Persatuan Bola Sepak Malaysia has a lot to answer, and who knows what will happen to Malaysian football on the international stage should FIFA complete its own additional investigations into Kelana Jaya for its culpability in the documentation fraud scandal. And perhaps FAM's only hope was to win the CS appeal, but I think the netizens already have that resigned feeling that it's not going to happen, and more is going to hit them than they would like. So, in the wake of that, perhaps it's not surprising that overall things felt very flat.